please or call Tom Vargas up to the lectern so he can introduce our speaker. Tom?
Hi everyone. Today we're going to hear about ValleyCare again. Last year, you remember we talked about the Global Health Unit, kind of in memory of Bill Geyer, really focusing on that. And today we're going to have more of a broader update on the things that are going on in ValleyCare, the Mobile Health Unit, and plus also, information regarding our discussions with Stanford regarding a potential alliance and other things. So, just as a background, we do have a long history of working with ValleyCare. It's our community hospital. Kim Weaver, David Murtis, and myself currently are on the board of directors for ValleyCare. Reverend Nebo, Paul Banke, among others, are former board members. And John Shirley, we were sitting there talking at the table, and he was telling us about how he was raising funds back when they first started ValleyCare Hospital, late 50s, early 60s. So today we have our speaker is going to be Scott Gregerson. Scott actually came to ValleyCare about 2 years ago, and he was brought into ValleyCare to assist with the negotiations and discussions regarding possible affiliation candidates. And we had a change in our CEO earlier this year, and Scott became the interim CEO, and ultimately, in a very short time, we brought him on as the permanent CEO. A little background of Scott's history. He was a corporate vice president of inpatient services at Fresenius Medical Cares, which is a publicly traded company with over $14 billion in net revenue. He was the vice president of strategy and business development for Doctors Hospital in Lanham, Maryland. He also worked for the Sonoma Valley Hospital in Sonoma. He just has a long history of activity for such a young guy. I think you will find Scott is infectiously enthusiastic, committed, hardworking, and we are very excited that he's our CEO, and he does a fantastic job. And so, Scott, without further ado, is going to bring us up.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes. Good. So as Tom mentioned, I came to the community about 2.5 years ago from Chicago, Illinois. And it's a little bit of coming home for me. I actually grew up in Modesto. I went to undergrad at Santa Barbara and ended up going back to Virginia for law school, where I met my wife. We actually both got bumped off a plane in Pittsburgh and met in the airport that night. So the great reason every man leaves his family is for a beautiful girl, and I did that. So I was torn between two coasts, frankly. Worked out of Washington, D.C. For a healthcare think tank. Worked at over 100 hospitals, and that was kind of launching my career into healthcare. I love healthcare. I love the ethical contribution. I am a lawyer, although I'm in recovery. And the work, the meaning of the community hospital is something that's in my DNA. I'm very committed to serving the next patient better than the last. And I have to say, having worked at over 100 hospitals, in some capacity, we literally have the best staff I've ever seen in my life. And that's not me being trite or just building up my current state. It is unbelievable how committed these people are. This is truly a model of neighbors taking care of neighbors. And it's something very much we intend to preserve as we evolve into the next era of healthcare, which inevitably we have to do. It will serve you, it will serve us, and it will preserve this asset for the next generation, which is really all of our responsibilities. This is something that you started. I'm honored to be a part of it. I work for an incredible board, one of which is here today. But frankly, this board and me directly, we work for a community, and that is a great thing. It is an honor I take very, very seriously. And we are going to succeed. This is not going to be an easy road, but it is one that we will be victorious in the end. So, sorry, I'm going to have you change it just on cue. Thank you, and Al's done a great job. I can tell just by the fact that it's up there. Out of my last 5 presentations, he's already in the top 40%. So we're in good shape right now. So please, maybe the next one. an unsustainable trajectory, the next one. So healthcare generally is not sustainable. So you can see this one actually, there's two big things. I'm a bit of a budding economist, but there's two big industries in our country, and I'm sorry, I'll step out of your way, that I believe are unsustainable. This is the college education inflation rate. You can see it's almost 500% against a normalized CPI of about 114%. So every year college is getting more expensive against what people make. And then maybe go to the next slide. You can see almost identical, frankly, to healthcare spending. So there's an effect. And again, this is education, this is healthcare. These are very important things for our society. But the question is, as you spend more dollars into this, are you getting bang for the buck? Because inevitably, you're crowding out other investments. As you spend more in healthcare, you're spending less in education, you're spending less in infrastructure. Is it really worth it? I mean, that's a question we always have to ask. So please, the next slide. One of my favorite Admiral Stockdale quotes, this was actually before his presidential run, or vice presidential run, you can never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end with the discipline to confront the realities you face now. And that's absolutely true. I believe we will make it, but I have to focus on the work at hand, and we all do at the hospital, and there is real work ahead, particularly for institutions of our scale. So this is the portion of U.S. economy spent on healthcare. We're creeping towards 20% GDP, which is an absurdly large number, just so everybody knows. Next slide. So here's the question. I brought it up before, but the question is value. So this is actual spending per person per year. So it starts at 0, goes to 8,000. And then this is life expectancy. So there's 7 main indicators that you think internationally regarding health. Things like infant mortality, life expectancy. So you can see these countries are spending about 1,000 per person per year, and these are their results. So you watch the value curve, and that's about what you would expect, is most people to fall on it. A standout, for example, is Japan, with the highest life expectancy, spending just less than 3,000 per year. The nice thing about the U.S. and all these charts is you can always find us because we're just this like broad anomaly. So we're all the way over here at 8,000 a year, and we're chasing the Czech Republic of the life expectancy chart. And that plays out over all 7 indicators. So we're spending much more money than anybody else, but frankly our results just aren't as good as they should be. Next slide, please. Again, just one more example. The U.S., that's spending per capita, and that's percent of GDP. You can see the industrialized countries that we compare ourselves to, it just isn't comparable, unfortunately. Go to the next slide. And then I've had a few people, I just added this slide. A lot of people said, well, we get better healthcare results, like for example on cancer. I did the research, there's breast, cervical, and colorectal. You can see the U.S. is all the way over here to the right. Our 5-year survival rate is almost identical to all the other industrial countries that we compare ourselves to. Next. So what does this really mean? And everyone says, well, you've got Obamacare to deal with. That's kind of a big deal. Quite honestly, Obamacare isn't that big of a deal. Obamacare is really insurance reform. It's a little complex. Yes, there's a bunch of regulations. But listen, every year the government comes up with something new for us to do. So it isn't that shocking to our system, particularly here where we don't have a lot of uninsured. The real challenge to healthcare has come from employers. For some reason, employers in this country got tired of healthcare premium increases of 13 and 14% a year without employees that were any healthier. They couldn't run their businesses, frankly, and this is now an international market. So if you can click just once. Healthcare costs add about $1,500 to the price of every GM vehicle. So the company spent in 2007 about $4.5 billion on healthcare alone. One more time. Japan's Honda pays about $150 per vehicle. So now if you're in Istanbul or Frankfurt and you're looking at these 2 vehicles, the GM car is going to be $1,400 more expensive, regardless of the value of the vehicle, just based on the inefficiency, frankly, of our healthcare system. And so in the world stage, it's very difficult to compete when you have that kind of discrepancy. Also, a fun fact for your friend, Starbucks actually spends more still on health insurance than they do on their raw commodity of coffee. Which is very interesting. And again, not a great thing for our global competitiveness in this country. Go next. So the employers are doing their own work. So basically they've given up on us to a certain extent. For example, Lowe's, which is in Dublin, right down the road from the hospital, if you need a heart surgery there, like a quadruple bypass, you actually will be going to the Cleveland Clinic. You will not be coming to our hospital that does that procedure. The reason is Lowe's got tired of paying different prices at every community hospital and getting different results, frankly, from every community hospital. So what they did was go to Cleveland Clinic, which is regarded as one of the best heart hospitals in the world, and say, hey, how much will you guys charge us? And Cleveland Clinic said, for $460,000, the average at the community hospital was $531,000 for the procedure. Not only will we do the procedure and all the post-operative care, we'll fly the family out, we'll put them up in a hotel room, we'll do everything you can think of for a guaranteed price. So all of a sudden, Lowe's said, employees, if you go to Cleveland Clinic, again, best hospital in the world or one of them, it will be $0 deductible. If you go to your local community hospital, it will be $25,000. So it's pretty easy math. If you're an employee, you're going to go, and guess what Lowe's gets? Lowe's gets a predictable product at a predictable price, and that's how you run your business. So we're actually getting tested more from employers, I would argue, than the government as a whole. I'm not competing just with John Muir. I'm now competing with Cleveland Clinic, MD Anderson, Sloan Kettering in New York. So it's a very challenging market space. Healthcare makes up 24% of the 2011 budget. Again, just for emphasis, healthcare is a big part of our economy, perhaps too big for the results we're getting. So this is why it matters to hospitals. This is the breakdown of your healthcare dollar. 40% of every dollar goes to hospital costs. So we are a very expensive part of this system. And I've gotten a lot of questions since I came into this role. You said that if you did your job right, the hospital would be smaller when you left. Because I believe, and I know I'm right, a disease prevented is always better than a disease treated. So our job as a healthcare system, and we are a system, we have physicians, we have clinics, we have a hospital, is not to drive people into the ER and get them laying in a bed. It's to make sure none of that happens, frankly. A healthier community means less of us as a hospital, but that's a good thing. That's an evolution that we should all, frankly, embrace. So keep going. This part I may go somewhat quickly on just because it's a little bit detailed, and I do want to leave time for your questions. But the government's just coming up with a lot of ideas how to kind of force that issue on us. They don't really have the political will to ration care. So what they're going to do is just give us less money, and we'll have to ration care because that's just how it works. So again, those are your politicians at work. On the next one, one more, please. So again, they're going to give us less by way of reimbursement. We still have the continuing cost pressure. Our labor force isn't going down 3% a year. It actually, healthcare escalation is a standard 3% a year. Our case mix is getting more difficult. People are aging in place. And as you get older, as some of you may not be surprised, you actually use more healthcare. So, hard to imagine, perhaps. And then the shifting payer mix. And this is actually an interesting slide, I think, for this group. So, our private payers, think the Uniteds, the Blue Shields, think the commercial insurance companies, they actually pay us about 134% of the cost of care. So we actually get paid very well from those people against the care that we provide. But Medicare and Medicaid, the two government payers, actually pay us less than the cost of care. So we use those commercial insureds to subsidize basically Medicare. So it's a bit of a hidden tax almost in this country. Well, the problem is, as more people convert from the private payers into Medicare, which is happening at about 10,000 people a day, it makes it that much harder to run the shop because more people are paying 90 cents for the service rather than $1.30. This is just one of my favorite slides. We got a 24-hour fitness and people are hitting the escalator, of course. But you don't want to work out before you get in the building. Like, you can't really start in the parking lot. So you got to park right there in front. You can go on to the next one. So let's talk a little bit about what this means for ValleyCare. So these are our results to date. Now, 14 and 15 are obviously projected, but we've lost quite a bit of money over the last 5 years. Whole bunch of reasons for that. One of the biggest ones being our physician strategy. It's very clumsy for hospitals to move out of this inpatient environment out into the physician market space. It's a necessary thing to do, and it's something that we did about 5 years ago, but we were still feeling that out a little bit. I believe we have a handle on it now, but again, it's going to be a very challenging year as we convert to a much leaner operation than the one we've historically seen. We have good affiliations locally. We've been with UCSF Benioff. They've been a phenomenal partner. Obviously, with our Stanford affiliation that I'm going to go into in a minute, that'll become more challenging just because UCSF and Stanford, they're mortal enemies ever since they broke up about 10 years ago. So I have a feeling that relationship will not survive. But again, both world-class institutions. We're lucky to have them so close. Access Community Health, I do want to mention, they do an unbelievable job in this community. And everyone's talking about population management, which just means treating people in the best place at the best time. Access has been doing that for a very long time with one of the most difficult patient populations you can imagine. I mean, these are poor, disenfranchised people, and frankly, There's no place worse to be poor than in a wealthy community, and Access deals with a great group of people and does a phenomenal job. So Sue Compton and her group deserve a ton of credit. Unbelievable work. Again, this is all about pushing things out of our beautiful facility in my mind. You do want things like urgent care centers. You do want things like clinics. I want diabetic clinics, CHF clinics. I want those things coming out into the community. Probably a good time to bring up the MHU. Great example of something that was provided by Rotary and just came a little bit before its time. I think many of you heard that we stopped the program. We did, but it's only temporarily. The government is going to come up with a reimbursement scheme once they realize, and they're in the process of it, that us going out with a diabetes clinic into the community is much cheaper than somebody having a diabetic stroke and coming into the ER. We're just proving those models now. We're basically waiting for a reimbursement stream to reset that program. So we have no intention of giving it up permanently. We're just waiting for the reimbursement model to catch up, frankly. So it will be a great asset. It's just going to be a year or 18 months before we can reset it. Of course, a lot of competition in this area. You all hear about John Muir. Kaiser's about 38% of the market. Stanford, Sutter, very, very active. And Tenant San Ramon, in their new relationship with John Muir, their new partnership has been very, very active. So at this point, we have barbarians at every gate, make no mistake. We had to find a white horse to come over the hill to push them off the wall. We simply don't have the financial resources to challenge these very large and sophisticated systems. We could have picked a fight with any of these, but it would have been exquisitely painful and mercifully short. They just would have gone right through us. So we are going to partner with Stanford. We're involved in that merger now. We're about 2 months in. I'm very cynical about these things. I've worked on a lot of M&A deals. They're always very fragile until the day they're not. But I have to tell you, this one has gone better than anyone I've ever seen. And I have great, great hope that this thing is going to go well. I really do. So we'll be going to the membership, obviously, before anything major happens. Because in the end, this community gets to judge if what we're doing really is in the best interest going forward. We will bring our story to you. Please. Now, it's kind of a narrative. Okay, well, we can end on this. So it's a Darwin quote. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. We really have to be nimble at this time. Fortunately, we're in a small hospital. We will be nimble. And this picture here is actually a coyote riding a mass transit system up in Portland. And there's actually a big story of it. You can look it up on Google. But every day, he would get on at the same stop and get off 3 stops later. So I think there's probably a lesson there for us as well. The things that look like a challenge maybe are pretty beneficial. You just have to look at it in a slightly different way. So I always thought that was a great lesson. But again, I want some time for questions. I know there's probably a few. And I'm sorry I don't want to eat into your afternoon, but maybe a couple.
Well, when you partner with Stanford, what are some examples of ways it helps you financially?
And Stanford has very, very deep pockets. They have a lot of free resources. They can reset the asset, make a big investment in it. They can also secure our physician front, stop our hemorrhaging of cash. And actually, once you start bringing physicians into the fold and looking at new opportunities for things like cancer and cardiac here in this community, it will take the air out of the room and push everybody back. They are a very sophisticated system. Their IT systems are second to none. They will bring all of that capacity here very, very quickly. It would be a sea change for this community. It really would. Please.
Follow up.
Yep.
What's in it for Stanford?
Well, it's a great question, and that's what we talked about very early on. Stanford wants to be relevant in the next era of healthcare. They are this shiny academic up on the hill where if you have a disease named after you, it's a great place to be. Believe me, they're the best ones to find an answer. But real medicine happens in the community in this country. 92% of medicine happens at community hospitals. If they really want to change the trajectory of healthcare in this country, as they avow that they do, they have to figure out how to do it in a community. And they're going to come here with those pilots and those ideas. They have 15 physicians that cannot wait to get out here and try new diabetes efforts, congestive heart failure efforts, all these pilots in this community. And if you prove it here, you can do it anywhere. We're very different than Stanford in that regard, and they're very excited about it. So this will be their incubator, and this is the best community for it. It's a very sophisticated community, and they will engage with Stanford in that kind of renewal of healthcare. I think it'll be awesome. Sorry, we're going to...
What power will the ValleyCare Board of Directors have if the merger takes place?
Yet to be determined. That's all going to be negotiated out of the definitive agreement. but it will be presented to the membership prior to them voting on it. You'll know what this looks like. And obviously retaining local control, but even more importantly, the local character of the hospital, that's critical to us, but it's also critical to Stanford. They understand the value of what we are, and they're almost as protective of it as we are, frankly. Please.
Does, if a merger takes place, does ValleyCare become a teaching hospital then?
It does, and they'll bring in probably a residency program. I'd guess family medicine, maybe OB, but for the most part, they want to preserve what this is. You try to make it a small academic, they just don't work. People have tried it before us. This is a community hospital. It should just be the best one in the country, but it still has to remain a community hospital. Please.
When this happens, assuming it does, what will your relationship be with Access Community Health? How do you see that developing?
My hope is that it will be enhanced, frankly. There's no reason. Stanford loves what the FQHCs do. They're federally qualified health centers. They recognize what Access does, and I'm a huge advocate for them. So hopefully Stanford will come in and enhance our relationship, although right now it's getting better every day. Please.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the relationship between Valley Health and the doctors and physicians. Do you see them becoming more and more like employees?
Yeah, I do, probably going forward. I have to say we have a foundation with about 45 physicians that are very closely aligned to the hospital. So the question is, what does the physician landscape look like going forward? I have to say physicians are going through kind of the same iteration that hospitals are. There is an advantage to scale. A lot of the regulatory pressures coming from government, things like installing IT systems, for a single physician in a single office, it's a very heavy lift. I mean, it's just not something that most of them are even able to do. You're seeing a lot of consolidation in the market space. And I have to tell you, once we announced the Stanford merger, it was like poking a hornet's nest and having to fall into a red ant mound. Like PAM came to life, MIR came to life, Washington, those guys are all over our community and they're going after our physicians, because if you control the physicians, particularly the primary care physicians, you control the market. That's our industry. So our job is to hold them at bay long enough to consummate the merger, which is all very interesting.
One more question.
Please.
You know, what's going to happen to our Livermore facilities?
Oh, great question.
They've gradually declined over the years and not much is left, honestly.
Great question. And I'm going to speak to all the hospital groups that answered our RFP. We did go through a request for a proposal period. We had 6 or 7 major healthcare systems in Northern California respond. They all saw great opportunity within Livermore. It's where the growth is going to be in the valley, frankly, in the next 10 years. We've got some new assets on the Livermore campus. That MOB is phenomenal, by the way, and that's kind of the future of medicine. But most of them see an opportunity to enhance in Livermore. Pleasanton's a pretty good site. It's actually sort of where it needs to be, minus maybe a center of excellence, cancer, or cardiac. But Livermore, I anticipate it will be built up, and pretty quickly things like a 24/7 high-end urgent care access, those types of things, they can be done in a moment, and everyone's looking to that line. And actually, Amir Rubin, who's the CEO of Stanford, he's touring with me on Monday. We try to tour every week, and he keeps wanting to go back to Livermore. We'll be back to Livermore again on Monday. I mean, they're taking a very, very hard look at it. They see great opportunity there. That's where the opportunity sits. It really does. And again, this is the community where it all started. It should come back full circle.
Okay, so I have a question. What's an MOB?
Oh, medical office building, sorry.
Oh.
So the medical, please stop me. It's
Very
worse than the
scientific
military,
term.
by the way. It really is. Like, we live and die in acronyms. No, it's a medical office building. It's where that surgery center is and all the physician offices. That's a great thing going forward, but there should be more of it. There should be more access to care locally in Livermore. And it's not going to be, if you don't see an acute care hospital, it's not where medicine's going. You want labs, you want imaging, you want outpatient services, you want diabetes clinics, CHF clinics, you want all those things in your community. The acute care enterprise is going to be less and less important, and that's a good thing. That means we're getting better at this. Well, thank you all for the time. Again, it's an honor to work for you.